I'm Brad, and I'm back, y'all, with another video. And in this video, I'm going to be reading Chapter 5 of Attack of the Vampire Weenies and Other Warped and Creepy Tales by David Lubar. So, here we go. I ignored the doorbell. I knew who was out there. I knew what he wanted. It rang again. "Get it, jerk!" my sister yelled from upstairs. I'd rather chew on a light bulb than turn the doorknob, but I didn't want Tammy angry with me. The last time she got really mad, she painted splash marks on the front of all my pants with clear nail polish, so it looked like I had an accident. The time before that, she emailed all my friends baby pictures of me getting a bath in the sink. Hoping I was wrong about who was out there, I turned the knob, then opened the door halfway and stared up at the vampire. He wore a black cape with a red lining. His hair was slicked back so it glistened in the moonlight. His cheeks were pale white. Dark circles made his eyes look like they had sunk into his skull. He started to step into the hallway. "You have to be invited," I said. "That's the rule." He shoved the door, knocking me back. "Get lost, Squirt!" "It's the rule," I shouted as he pushed past me. "A vampire can't enter a home unless he's invited. Everyone knows that." He walked over to the stairs and called up. "Hey, Tammy, I'm here. Come on. The party's already started. I'll be right down," she said. Dalton, that's the name of my sister's boyfriend, went into the living room and plopped down on the couch. I followed him. "You can't sit there!" He glared at me. "What's your problem?" "It's not my problem, it's yours." I pointed at the small cross that hung on the wall between the photo of Grandma and the painting of a cactus my parents had bought last year when we were on a vacation in Arizona. "Vampires can't stand the sight of a cross." He leaned forward and put his hands on my shoulder. "Look, kid, I am a vampire. So don't tell me what I can and can't do. Just go read your comic books or whatever it is that gives you all these ridiculous ideas." "You're not a vampire," I said. "You're just a vampire wannabe." "Wait, I know. You're a vampire weenie. That's what you are." "What did you say?" His eyes got dangerous for an instant. He almost looked like someone who could drain the blood from my body. "Come on, open that smart mouth again." He sprang up from the couch. I took a step back. Tammy drifted into the room. "Okay, I'm ready. Let's go." Dalton seemed to forget I even existed. I guess he liked that way she looked. I can't imagine how anyone except maybe an undertaker would feel that way. She was wearing a long white dress and too much makeup. The circles around her eyes were larger than his. His cheeks were white, but with a touch of red. That was wrong too. Vampire skin is as white and lifeless as the belly of a dead fish. He touched her cheek. "You sparkle." She touched his. "So do you." They headed out. For crying out loud, vampires don't sparkle, I shouted as the door closed. Okay, it was after the door closed, but I was angry now and I felt like yelling. "You aren't vampires! You're just big kids playing dress up and acting moody. You don't know the rules, you stupid sparky wannabe weenies." I could feel my own blood boiling. Tammy and her friends were completely giggling and weird about vampires. They had vampire parties all the time, where they drank strawberry soda, cherry punch, and even tomato juice. They read books and watched movies where the vampire is always this unbelievable handsome guy. This is so totally wrong. They didn't know anything. A vampire isn't some sort of handsome prince, and a vampire definitely isn't some gloomy teenager who flunked algebra twice and likes to pick on his girlfriend's little brother. A vampire isn't a girl who reads some stupid book 17 times and thinks she can become one of the characters. A vampire is a blood-sucking whore who sleeps in a coffin filled with his native soil, lives with bats, rats, and spiders, and carries nothing inside him but death and disease. A vampire shies away from crosses and can't stand the odor of garlic. He needs permission to enter a house. Holy water burns his skin. He'll die if he's exposed to sunlight or if you drive a wood stake through his heart. But even with a stake through his heart, he won't remain dead unless you chop off his head and stuff the neck with garlic. Tammy and her friends would know this if they read the right books, the old books, but they rather dress up in silly costumes and drink fake blood than learn the truth. My parents were out. They go out all the time, which meant I was alone in the house. That was fine with me. I went up to my room to play soldiers and snipers. I might know everything there is to know about vampires, but unlike Tammy, I had other interests too, like online multiplayer shooters. I heard Tammy and Dalton when they came back late that evening. We should have the next party here, Tammy said. What about your parents? Dalton asked. They'll be out of town next weekend, Tammy said. I already knew about that. Dad was going to some sort of convention in Boston. Mom was tagging along since seeing Boston is probably a lot more fun than staying home with their kids. What about your brother? Dalton asked. During the pause that followed his question, I felt a shiver down across my skin. We can lock him up in the basement or something, Tammy said. Great. They are going to have a party with all their stupid vampire friends, and I get to sit in the dark of the basement stairs, listening to footsteps on the ceiling, waiting for them to let me out. I stormed downstairs. No way you're locking me in the basement. Tammy almost looked guilty, but Dalton grinned. We'll do whatever we want. You have no power over us, mortal. Be gone, or I'll unleash my fury upon you. Vampires don't grin either, I said, and I don't have power. And I do have power. I'll tell my parents. You do, and you're dead, Dalton said. Then I'll die happy. I stood my ground. I knew they had to give in. They wanted their party more than I wanted to escape a beating. Look, I don't care about your stupid party. I won't even come downstairs. I'll stay in my room, but there's no way you're locking me up. Dalton looked at Tammy. Tammy looked back at them. They both shrugged. Just keep out of the way, she said. That's exactly what I'm planning to do. But as I headed upstairs, I realized I wanted to do one other thing, too. If all of Tammy's vampire weenie friends were coming to a vampire party, I was going to give them just what they were asking for. The idea was so perfect. I froze on the steps when it hit me. Somehow, somewhere, I was going to find a real vampire and get him to come. This would teach them a lesson. I knew vampires were real. I knew they were out there. There were too many myths and stories, too many legends. They had to be a source for all of that. And when the real vampire revealed his foul, evil nature, and all of Tammy's friends were cowering and screaming, I'd step in with my vampire killing tools and save the day. That was such a great plan. I'd shut them up for good and be a hero. Tammy would never be able to boss me around again. Dalton would tremble when I stared at him. I just needed to find a vampire. I checked my books for ideas, but nothing I read seemed like it would help me lure a vampire to the party. Most people were much more interested in keeping them away. If knowledge wouldn't do the trick, I'd have to go with a guess. I was pretty sure about one thing. Vampires must hate all the stuff people think about them. All the wrong stuff and nonsense. That was it. If Tammy and Dalton endless blabbing made them angry, then how furious would it make a vampire? I typed up a flyer for the party. I made it sound so fanish and non-seating that no living person who saw a flyer would be tempted to come. I also made it so extremely stupid in a vampire weenie sort of way that any real vampire who read it would be sure to come. At the top I put, Super Awesome Vampire Get Together. Below I wrote, Come sparkle with us, have oodles of dark fun, playing vampire games and making new vampire pals. There will be bloodsuckers, coffin cakes, and lots of other goodies. I went on for a full page tossing in everything I heard Tammy talk about, along with a bunch of stuff I made up. I finished it with your vampire hosts, Tammy and Dalton. Would you like to thank you for coming? I ran off 200 copies on my dad's printer and walked all over town stuffing them where people would never go but vampires might, in crypts, at cemeteries, behind blood banks, and through the cracked basement windows of abandoned buildings. I had a good feeling about my plan. It was going to work. I bet anything that a real vampire would come to the party just to show the vampire Tammy and Dalton how wrong they were. Saturday evening, Tammy put on a creepy music and lit a bunch of candles. I don't know what candles had to do with vampires. They can see in nearly total darkness. While she and Dalton were out buying chips and stuff, I set up a room as a vampire trap. I hid the cross behind the picture grandma. I hung another cross behind a counter on the other side of the room. I chopped off a whole piece of garlic and put it inside one of those sealed plastic tubs that wonton soup comes in when we have to take out. I washed the outside so it didn't smell at all and stuck the container under the couch where I could grab it when I needed to. Along with a couple wooden stakes, I kept the holy water in my pocket. I sneaked into St. Sebastian's yesterday and swiped some, just a little, but that's all I needed. I waited upstairs, watching out the window. Tammy and Dalton's stupid vampire weenie friends started showing up after sunset. The flyers said the party started at 10 o'clock. I didn't want the vampire to show up until all the guests were here. I knew him when he came. He stopped at the door to ask permission to enter, and those fools would get it to him. He'd probably hide his face somehow since they would never let him in if they saw how horrifying it was. They were so lucky I was planning to save them, though if the vampire started to feast with Dalton, I'd be tempted to hold off until he was finished. I spotted the vampires when he was half a block away. It had to be him. He was taller than any of Tammy's friends, and he didn't move like someone rushing to a party. His head was down, so I couldn't see his face, but I could just imagine the horror of it. He was wearing dark clothes and a cape. I sneaked out of my room and watched from the top of the steps. The doorbell rang. Tammy went and opened it. "Oh my," she said. The room fell silent, as if the vampire's presence was enough to suck the sounds from the air. Whoa. That was me. I managed to choke back my gasp. It didn't matter. I didn't think anyone would have looked in my direction, even if I smacked the wall with a baseball bat. No, when they had him to stare at, if you gathered the 10 best-looking movie stars on the planet and squished all their good looks into one person, that person would look ugly next to the visitor at the door. All the girls acted like they were about to faint. The vampire spoke. "Good evening." He put his hands on his chest and bowed. "Count Vranska asked permission to enter this house." "Who gives it?" You want to drink our blood, will you?" Tammy asked. He smiled at her, and she let out a little whimper. "I would never dream of doing that," he said. Then he repeated the question. "Who gives Count Vranska permission to enter?" "I do." Tammy took a step towards him. "Please come in with pleasure." He moved into the room. I couldn't believe how handsome he was, but he was still a vampire, and I was still going to save the day. Even if I was wrong about how he should look, I knew it was right about the rest of it. He'd go for the blood soon, and I'd be a hero. Downstairs, all the kids had gathered around him, so he said, "You are not afraid of vampires." "We are vampires," Dalton said, "all of us." "Perhaps some of you will be exactly what you think you are soon," Count Francisca said. He started Tammy, locking his eyes on her neck. It was hero time. I leaped down the stairs, raced to the pictures of Grandma, and knocked it off the wall, revealing the first cross. Then I ran the other wall and pulled down the calendar. "Trapped," I shouted, reaching into my pocket for the holy water. Instead of cringling or flinching, Count Francisca signed and walked toward me. "You've been reading too many comic books, young man," he said. "Back," I shouted, holding up the bottle of holy water. He plucked the bottle from my hand, unscrewed the cap, and drank the water. "Ah, refreshing," he said. Then he walked over to the wall and took down the first cross and slipped into his pocket. Anyway, guys, this chapter is so long that I'm going to be making part 2. So I hope you enjoyed this, and please press the like button and please subscribe. This is Brad signing off.